Hello again, Mr. Richard Vickers. It's always good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Oh my gosh, Carson, great to see you. Seems like forever that we've had a chance to talk. You've been traveling the world as well as I've been on some travels myself, so it's good to finally connect together.
Always good to catch up. Good to take in some of your pearls of wisdom. And, it's always, I feel like it's my responsibility to share your pearls of wisdom with the world. So
Oh my
today
God.
we're going to talk about getting smarter every day, which is the first book by my friend Richard Vickers. Congratulations.
My gosh, Carson, thank you. And I need to thank you publicly, actually, to all of the listeners and people who follow both of us. You were one of the ones in the background for the last couple of years, just kind of gently pushing me along, saying, "Hey, Vickers, you really need to put that as a chapter in your book, or you need to get this produced." And so, man, with several people's encouragement, but you were top of that list, my friend. So
Hey,
thank you for that.
well, then I did the world a favor if I encouraged you in any way. Getting smarter every day is great. I want to start with your motivation. What I loved too, obviously you start by dedicating the book to your wife and to your kids, but when you also talk about your failures
Oh.
and tell us about the motivation for the book. I feel like you're such a great, authentic, genuine storyteller, and I'd love to know, like, what was the motivation to finally put, your words out there?
Well, it's interesting that you put it that way because I did in the dedication. I have failed publicly. I've failed privately. There's been little bitty failures along the way that I go, oh my God, I'm never going to do that again. And I think we forget that how we become smarter is through some of our failures. And so that was the motivation behind the dedication. And then really the motivation behind the book was in so many of my teachings, my seminars, some of the stuff that I do at work, and then a lot of my guest speaking events, I would talk about different topics. Like my keynote address for thermostat thermometer was, I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years. And every time I do it, somebody says, "Hey, do you have that in written form or do you have that
Mm.
in a book form?" And I'd be like, "No, why would I have that like that?" And then the more that I would get requests to be a guest speaker or to do a seminar on a certain topic, the more I was like, it would really be a good leave behind to have for people who wanted to dive into more of the topic or to hear some other stories that I share.
I love you touched on being a thermostat and a thermometer. Talk to us a little bit about that. How can somebody set the temperature, especially if they have very little authority,
Right.
or they're in a room that's very negative? How can one person be the difference maker?
Yeah, and I think that's the whole premise behind it. I talk about the fact in the book that I wasn't allowed to touch the thermostat when I was growing up because my dad would, pretty much tear somebody limb from limb.
I'm not
Who
allowed to
touched?
touch the thermostat in my own house.
So there, case in point. So I was a little bit behind the eight ball when I never forget going to college at my first apartment. I was like, do I turn this up or down for the air conditioning to come on? And it was, I will never forget that. And then as I started seeing people and how they interact, and I started putting people in a couple of categories. Either the thermometer, you're just in a meeting or in a room, you're just a person that whatever the temperature is in the room, you go up or down depending on the mood of the room. Then I also noticed some thermostats. I would consider you a thermostat, Carson. You enter a room or a meeting or an assignment, and you decide, well, we're going to turn up the thermostat in this room, or we're going to turn it down. We're going to make things go. And that little analogy has helped so many people realize, ooh, I am just sitting here, not being an influence. And that analogy between the thermostat and thermometer has helped. And I thought I was genius that I had come up with this great concept. And still, I started reading the letter from the Birmingham jail of Martin Luther King. And he had written to some of his people talking about the church that it was either the thermostat or the thermometer. They could either set the direction and the temperature, or they could just be there existing. And I love that chapter, and I love telling that story. It's probably the oldest story that I have that's in the book, but it's so near and dear to my heart, I had to put it in there. Matter of fact,
You
I
know,
think
I
it
was
opens the book.
I always find it fascinating too. Like, you come up with these phenomenal ideas, and often there are similar themes and methodologies out there, but it doesn't, I don't think it takes away in any way, shape, or form, because again, these are guiding principles and these are things that you have to apply in any given moment. In small pan thinking,
Oh,
you talk about generations of people that are following a practice after the original constraint had disappeared. Tell us about, how is small pan thinking? How do you apply that in your current life? How have you recognized and eliminated something from your own life or leadership style?
yeah, I talk about growing up. My mom would always put the ham in this pan and cut off big old chunks on either end of the ham. And one day, one of my brothers asked her, "Why do we do that?" And because he had done that for his own family.
Yeah.
And she didn't know why. Long conversation. We went back all the way back to an aunt that knew the reason why is because our great grandmother didn't have a lot of cooking utensils. She just had a small pan, and the ham wouldn't fit in her pan. We thought it was some secret sauce to make it taste better or moisture. But the bottom line for me for that story is so many of us get caught up in we have always done it that way before, or this is the way it's always been. I was noticing your office. You've changed some things up in your office, probably because it's just your mindset, wanting to have a new outlook, change some things, feature some things on your wall. But every single one of us need to do that internally. Um, we need to realize, hey, I can break out of this small pan thinking.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be done this way. An old timer used to put it this way: the only difference between a ditch and a grave is a ditch. If you get off in it, it has both ends kicked out of it. A grave, it has two ends that you get buried in. And if you get off in a ditch, it's almost the same thing. You just keep on going.
Yeah.
So get out of the ditch. And that's what my thought process behind small pan thinking is, because I think there's so many creative people and creative ideas out there. I tell my team this all the time. I need your ideas and your thinking, because if you're depending on me to have all the answers, then we are in a heap of trouble. We're in deep yogurt because I don't have all the answers.
And people respond to that. That's when people provide their best work, is when they feel seen, valued, empowered, and their input is part of the puzzle. Um, Oftentimes I find that, when a leader is transparent and when the team is bought in, even if the direction that the boat ends up rowing isn't the one that the team said, they
Yeah.
are bought in because they were heard and they were a part of the plan. I love that. And there was another piece that really jumped out at me. You talk about both do the thing and also prepare, plan, perform. I mean, conceivably, somebody might read this and say these are in contrast. However, what I love about it is it's very clear. Like, you've got to make sure you prepare for what you're about to do. I've got a saying that I always like to say: before you feast, you've got to set the table. You've got to make sure you understand the playing field, the different variables, so that you can control the controllables, and then you execute. You've got to commit to a plan and go forward. How do you recognize the difference between that necessary prep and then procrastination that's disguised as prep?
Well, I'm glad you called out those two chapters, because this being an author. I go back to those two chapters and I think to myself, ooh, should I have put plan, prepare, perform? Should I have put that before do the thing? Because I wrestled with that back and forth, because do the thing is all about, sometimes you got to get off the middle of the fence
Yes.
You've thought about the diet, or you've thought about working out, or you've thought about, meal prep on Sunday nights, or you've thought about, educating yourself and learning and development and getting in a new lane and new lifestyle. You've thought about those things. Maybe you've even prepared for those things. But there comes a point in time, as the old timers would say, you either need to poop or get off the pot.
Heard that one.
So, probably in the more or less PG version of that. And that's what Do the Thing's all about. I'm just encouraging people, man, whatever that thing is, learning how to play guitar, learning how to play piano, taking that new adventure, all of those things will never happen until you get off dead center. And so that's why I think that Prepare, Plan, and Perform probably should have came before that chapter, because it is so important, and as leaders, to have those steps at least in your head so that you can have an outline, have a certain direction, and make sure that you get to the desired outcome.
Correct, maybe, but I would also challenge that to say, I think to do the thing, you've got to commit to
Yeah.
prepare, plan, perform. I mean, that is part of the process, and so I love the fact that you highlight the criticality of committing. And look, we're in a day and age where everything around us is just constantly evolving. You talked about destination disease, which I
Ooh.
loved, and you know, I'm so guilty of this, believing that something magical is going to happen after the next job or that award, that achievement, that salary, that milestone. What destinations have you thought would finally get you to become fulfilled? But then what did you need to do, or what place did you need to get to realize that that wasn't really the case?
Well, I think Arthur C. Brooks probably has
Oh,
done so much research on this,
love Arthur C. Brooks.
more than I could ever divulge. But that's where that whole concept of destination disease came from for me, because he talks about Olympic athletes that when they get on the stand and they put that around their neck, that is like 5 seconds of the euphoria.
Yeah.
The joy for that athlete was the 4 years before of all of the steps preparing, all of the small victories along the way, and the people that they met, the coaches that helped them. The actual getting to the destination, 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 15 minutes of fame, whatever you want to call it, that was just a small, small part. But it was that, and I put it this way, it's not about the destination. It's not even about getting to the destination. It's who you become on that journey to get to that Olympic stand, that piano recital, that new title. That new title isn't the thing. Who you've become along the way, that that is where the gold is at.
God, I love that. Um, I was recently on vacation and I did a lot of reading, and I've been studying legends or greats across different disciplines. So, I read a book about Michael Phelps and one about Winston Churchill, Michael Jordan, just diving into some of these memoirs of
Ugh.
flawed people like all of us who have made great choices, made poor choices, and frankly also ones that, we may look back and revere their career, but it
Yeah.
wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. And you hit on something really important there, Richard, because we think about, wow, if I can get to the top of that mountain of
Yeah,
career
that's it.
success or whatever it is. But to your point, I read something years ago, and I'm a huge James Bond fan. So there was a Bond continuation novel where one of his professors was talking about that moment where success is actually just this blip. It's you win this deal, well, it's over and done with. Now it's what are you going to do next for me?
Yeah.
And you have a great year, poof,
Yeah.
it's over, and now the scoreboard's back to zero. Those moments are fleeting, but what I think is critical is how do you teach? How do you give forward, help other people on their journey based on the experience that you have? And we don't have to be perfect or know everything in order to be good at helping guide others on their journey because they're also at different places. And one of the points that you make that I found to be very profound is that people are always auditioning for the next role long before they apply. And I'm a firm believer in this. There's a lot shifting right now with jobs, job responsibilities, roles, and there's a lot of noise about, what's the future of work going to look like. What evidence do you think people should be accumulating and building right now if they want to become undeniable tomorrow?
Well, I think there are several human skills that people need to double down on. Um, I think dependability is a lost art. Showing up and letting your employer or the people you work with know that they can count on you. Um, that reliability is dependability, reliability. You can use those words interchangeably. I just think it's a lost art of, I'll put it this way. If you just show up,
Yeah,
you've beaten half of the people that are out there. And
which
if
is
you,
amazing.
it's amazing to say that out loud.
Yeah,
But then add on top of that, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be easy to work with.
yeah,
Oh, that sets you another 25% up over the other group of people that are out there that are not easy to work with. And then you added a couple more human traits like your attitude. I'm gonna approach this with a great attitude. I'm gonna be adaptable when they throw me a curveball. I was watching the home run derby, and our St. Louis Cardinals showed up strong. And now we've lost half of our listeners now, Carson, by just mentioning the St. Louis Cardinals. But you think about that and how people show up. So adaptable, no matter the curveballs. And resiliency, I think, is a lost art. Being resilient, showing up, knowing that I can't fix every problem, but the things that are in my control to fix, I'm going to fix those. So I think all of the agility, adaptability, resiliency, dependability, if I could think of some other LY words, I would throw them in there. I think all of those things are things that we can double down on as humans that will continue to write our resume for us
I love that.
because people want those people.
It's true. Yeah, I was working on an article recently, and it was about basically, AI can definitely help you do things quicker, but it doesn't build scar tissue. There's wisdom and experiences that we're accumulating that can make us the overwhelmingly obvious choice for what we might want to do next or what the next job may look like. The next job you have or what you're doing 5 years from now may not even exist today. And
Yep.
while that can be a little daunting if you think about it. Sometimes it's critical to just make sure we're landing the step in front of us. You talk about and you remind us that titles are rented. Um,
Yeah.
and look, there's so many reorganizations and getting passed over for promotions or getting denied jobs. There's, retirement and job loss, but the challenge that I think a lot of us have, sometimes myself included, is we identify ourselves with the work that we do. Like, I'm a salesman, I'm a sales leader, I'm this and that. And when something changes or a title is stripped away, we feel like a part of us is gone. Um,
Yeah.
how in the world does somebody maintain confidence and identity when these things are stripped away, or you're passed over for that promotion, or you're thrown into some new role in a reorg?
Yeah, and I'm doing this even right now with the book coming out because people are introducing me a certain way. Earlier this morning, I got introduced in a meeting, and it was so nice and so kind and so flowery. But I wrote down on my pad, "You are the same person today that you were before you wrote this book."
Mm,
And it's just a constant reminder to me that don't believe my own press releases. So at the same time that you don't believe your own press releases, you have to be building up your resume of things you've accomplished, of things you have done, so that you know you can do the job, but at the same time, you're not going to be this braggadocious, hard to live with person that, hey, this is who I am now because I'm a published author. I'm still the same guy that was just writing LinkedIn articles, 4 years ago, and wondering if I got 2 likes on, if somebody read it, 2 people read it, now I have people sending me some of the things that has resonated with them, and to me, it just keeps on being so humbling and honoring. I think, and hopefully I have time to tell this story. I think about that defense contractor colonel that was like the guest speaker. He had this title, and they picked him up at the hotel in his car. They drove him to the event, took him in, handed him a cup of coffee in this really nice cup, and he went up to speak to all the people that were there. The next year, he was invited back, but he wasn't the keynote speaker. He was just like one of the ancillary speakers because he didn't have the title. Somebody else had that title. And he got up to give his keynote, Carson, and he said, "Today I didn't have a chauffeur pick me up. I had to take an Uber here. Today, I didn't even know how to get to the back of the stage because last time they ushered me in through hallways and showed me where to go. And finally, I found the backstage today." And he said, "See this styrofoam cup?" I said, "Hey, can I get a cup of coffee?" And they were like, "Oh, the coffee maker's over there." So I went over and got myself my own styrofoam cup and poured myself this cup of coffee. And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you that story not to make anybody feel bad that's sitting here. I tell you that story to say that I am the same person last year that got ushered in and drove over here in a car as I am this year holding this styrofoam cup." That is what I was trying to convey in that part of the book, because so many of us get caught up in the titles and the guest speaking spots, and we forget, we probably all just deserve a styrofoam cup, but those titles are fun, and enjoy them, man. Enjoy the ride, enjoy the chauffeured limousine, enjoy, ladies and gentlemen, Carson Heady, welcome him. Enjoy those things because you should, but don't ever forget that the next year you may be at a different speaking slot and pouring your own cup of coffee.
I love that. Lots of thoughts there. You should always remember how those moments made you feel, and you should
Ooh,
seek out things that can and will make you feel something similar. I've been doing a
true.
lot of reading recently with like Dave Evans and Bill Burnett, Designing Your
Oh,
Life, and it always talks about start where you are. And I've been through a lot of reorganizations where, I won the biggest award in the company and then I got tossed into another role. My role ceased to exist. And these things can be very mind-boggling. But over time, you develop kind of that alligator skin as a result of these things. But you've always got to start where you are, but you also have to sometimes compare where you are currently with where you were a year, 2 years, 5 years ago. Because even if your circumstances have changed or you feel like you're in a different, lesser place, you have these, and I created this vision board as a result of reading that book Designing Your Life, where I've got my favorite pictures of my from my entire life on my wall in my office. And so every day I can see these pictures of family and experiences that I've had that make me feel like $1 million, but they're fleeting. That was a picture that took a second to snap. But the reality is, like you said before, Richard, it's everything that led up to that point. Why did that moment happen? What did I
yeah.
do? What seeds did I plant even years before that led to that moment? And those are the things that, history and experience is evidence. There are evidence leaves clues. There's things that we've done in the past that have led to great outcomes. And all you can control is this moment in front of you. And don't get me wrong, it's not easy. I mean, I still struggle with that sometimes about
Oh
thinking
man.
about titles and, I'm nothing if I can't reach this
Yeah.
title and this person I got passed over because of this person or this thing or whatever it is. But the reality is all we can control is how we show up, that we show up, how we treat everybody that we touch and talk to, and like what kind of a team player or a collaborator we are, and then the mindset we choose to have. That's it.
Yeah.
One step in
Yeah.
front of the other.
Yeah. And I love that vision board, and I love you talking about those pictures, because when I see Carson, I see who he has become through all of those steps along the way. And no matter how many Olympic medals we get around our neck, or how many times we get to stand on the platform and say, "Man, I did it," and those things should drive us. All of those things are not bad things; they're fantastic things. Quick example: I had a manager for 2.5 years that I absolutely hated, Carson, just hated, because he just seemed like he was always pushing my buttons. It was like oil and water. But I look back now on those 2.5 years, and I was being really shaped, number one, in who I did not want to be, but number two, in who I was becoming. Those moments, uh, like the crushing of coal, those moments helped perfect that diamond and help shape who I truly am becoming. So even the rough moments, if you're going through a reorg or going through a situation that is ugly right now, maybe it's in your personal life, never forget that those moments are shaping you too. Now, you're not going to see it in the moment, in the storm, but you certainly are going to eventually look at that time period. Like I look at that 2.5 year time period now, and I go, my God, that really shaped my core beliefs of who I am as a leader.
Beautiful. As we close, last question. How can people get smarter every day?
Wow, that's a great question, because I started that hashtag, as you know, years ago
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. Every time I would write something, maybe I would hear you say something, or I would read something, or sometimes I'd come up with an original thought of my own, or at least I thought it was, and I would write, getting smarter every day. I For me, I think it's, if people can continue to allow themselves to be open to learn more, to realize that everybody that you meet has something to teach you, um, whether they have a title or they don't have a title, everybody that we meet can teach us something. And somebody was asking me the other day, how did you come up with so many stories in your book? Stories are everywhere.
Yeah.
And just being a life observer, I think, helps us to get smarter every day. But staying open to those experiences and realizing there are moments happening every single minute of every day.
Beautifully said, my friend, as always. Richard Vickers, getting smarter every day. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Carson. And there's a couple stories in this book that were direct result of us having these kind of conversations. So I cannot thank you enough, my friend.
I back at you, man. You make me better every day, every time we talk. And I definitely enjoyed reading a lot of the stuff that had been reminiscent of conversations we've had throughout the years. So thank you for sharing your words with the world,
Man, thank you, brother.
buddy. We'll see you next time.